Hi everyone, Jennifer Blevins-Smith with Integral Clinic Solutions, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Navigating the Business of Medicine. Today we're going to talk about what you should be doing in November and December of this year to prepare for next year. Well, we're in November now, and there are some things that you really should be doing in your practice to prepare for next year. I know I release a lot of these types of videos at the end of every year, but it's because it's such a very important time to set up yourself for success for next year. Okay, so we're just going to go over some high-level items today of things that you should be doing and actively researching to be able to forecast for next year. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is reviewing your financial performance. This means you're going to be running reports. You're going to look at your year-to-date financials. So you're going to look at statements of your revenue. You're going to look at your expenses, your net profits, etc. And you're going to then look at your payer mix trends, which payers are being profitable, which ones are not, which ones are kind of being a little bit bigger pain in your side for different reasons that could come out. And then you want to look at your billing and collections performance specifically to the medical insurances and patients. So you're going to want to look at your denial rates, of course, from insurances. You're going to look at your days in AR overall, but also down to the patient level and insurance separate. And then, of course, your aging buckets. You're going to look at your insurance aging, your patient aging, and then your total averages overall. And we've talked about this a lot. But by running your financials, looking at your net profits and things like that, you're going to kind of get an idea of what your cash flow should look like for the first quarter of next year. That's because we're going to be in deductible season again. So when you're looking at the current year's finances, keep in mind how long you were in kind of the red, if you will, for this year, and kind of anticipate the same thing for next year. So if you were out of the red after February, that's fantastic. You can hope that that will be the same this year. But by looking at how well you did during this year's deductible season, of course, there's other factors that play into that, but hopefully you'll be able to get an idea of what your cash flow should be for the first quarter of the following year. And then that aging report and that payer mix, you might want to consider some other things based off the information that it's providing, okay? The second thing you want to do is make sure you're looking at your insurance contracts, especially if it's been a while, and you also want to look at overall credentialing verification. I'm not just talking about insurance credentialing, although that is something that you want to look at to see if there's any providers that will be upcoming to renew their credentialing with any payers. However, when I'm saying credentialing in this way, I mean, like, are there going to be any license expiring that's coming up that you're going to have to make sure gets renewed? DEA licenses, CLIA numbers. I just did a video about CLIA number expiration and how that can be very detrimental to cash flow. Malpractice coverage, CAQH reattestation, updating the CAQH profiles for providers. Anything that could have an expiration or needs updating, this is a perfect time to do an inventory of the following year just to make sure that you're on top of it. And if there's anything that's going to fall during what I call the holiday peak season, which is about now through the end of December, beginning of January, make sure that you're keeping that in mind and getting a head start on those. If anything were to expire, like a DEA number, you can't prescribe controlled substances, or the provider cannot, until it's renewed. If the CLIA ID or certificate expires, you cannot be doing those labs until you get a renewed one. If a provider's license expires, they cannot be seeing patients and treating patients until it's renewed. These can be very detrimental, so it's very important to be staying on top of that. I mentioned insurance contracts. You want to make sure that you see when's the last time that you requested an update to your contract and the fee schedules. And if it's time to request an increase, definitely get on top of that and use ChatGPT to be able to format some letters for you with information you gather to send those to your payers now. And hopefully, maybe fingers crossed, you could get that increase to go into effect January 1, which would be very easy to track if it worked out that way. Another thing, compliance and policy updates. You need to make sure your HIPAA training is all completed this year with all of your staff. Remember, this has to be done yearly. Make sure if you have a clean desk policy, which hopefully you do as part of your HIPAA training, that there's compliance with that and everyone is following that policy. That your OSHA, CLIA, lab, QC logs, everything has been done regularly. You're doing kind of an audit to make sure your staff who is responsible for all of this is staying on top of it. And if you're finding any gaps or you're finding any places where there's opportunities for improvement, you're writing that down and you implement it so it can go into effect as soon as possible, because this could be bad for your practice as well. And then just look at your security practices as far as electronic communication, emails, your IT security as far as your networks and your Wi-Fi and your backups and everything like that. Definitely a good time to be doing an inventory and checking to make sure everything is at par or exceeding par when it comes to the requirements for compliance, okay? Then you have your operational planning and workflow improvements. We all know that things are constantly changing in the practice, and you want to make sure that your policies reflect the changes, that your staff understands the changes, it's all been communicated. Also, are you staffed appropriately? Are you going to be ready for Q1, right? Does the front office staff need a retraining or a reminder that deductible season does start, which means that a lot of people get new insurances, and so they need to be mindful of that, updating the system when they're scheduling, scanning those insurance cards when they're checking them in, things like that. Are your scheduling templates all up to date? Are they out far enough? A lot of people will do templates for scheduling through the end of the year, but then they have to do it again for the following year. Has that been done? And should you add or discontinue any services in the practice? Like, a lot of patients have been asking about this service, so we should probably add it and put those workflows into place. Or we're not getting paid for this service, or a lot of patients don't utilize this service, so we're going to discontinue it. Now is a good time to have that discussion internally with the practice managers, the owners, whoever would be helping make those decisions. If you're the office manager or the owner, now is a good time to ensure that all your employees are up to date with their reviews. If they were due for any this year, if you are behind, get caught up on them. You want to do any training refreshers if they've kind of been slacking on that. You want to make sure that your annual performance reviews are done. It's always a good idea to do it annually. Even if you can't give a raise to your staff, you really should still be doing performance reviews. You need to set clear role expectations for the new year, especially if you have new staff coming on, new providers joining you. Any changes that are coming on, you need to make sure that you are communicating that to your staff. Identify any training gaps, maybe you have already, hopefully you have already, and that you can fix those. And you want to make sure that you plan a team office meeting maybe a few weeks into the first year after kind of the holiday hangover settles, just to answer any questions, go over anything that you identify that needs a little bit of assistance with re-education or reminders, things like that. And you want to make sure that you're leading by example and that you're not cutting corners, and that you are showing them that you want things to work as optimally as possible. You're going to have better employee satisfaction. So you just need to make sure that you're doing everything you should as the owner and or manager. Take a look at your technology. Do you need to buy new devices because they're outdated, they're slow? You can budget for that. You can watch for sales, because the end of the year with all of the Black Friday and the holidays and everything like that, there's a lot of sales out there. So maybe try keeping your eye out for that. Is your EHR running the most updated version of itself? Are all the other software that you use updated? Because that's a huge vulnerability for cyber attacks. Do you need to create any new templates for anything? Are you making sure that your financial files are backed up, not just your EMR, but any of your other business files that you use in other software? Is that backed up and updated? And then, just check in with your clearinghouse, make sure if there's any changes coming up in the first of the year with your payers, with their payer IDs, if they're going to stop accepting electronic claims or sending ERAs, or if they're going to start accepting electronic claims and sending ERAs, that you're aware of that so you can update your software as needed. Okay, so just some things to keep in mind. And lastly, patient communication, huge, especially at the end of the year. A lot of the schedules get a little crazy with people taking time off for the holidays. People can get sick. This is a peak time of year for illness. So you want to make sure that the communication to your patients is very, very good. You want to make sure they have multiple different ways of contacting your office when needed, and that you can contact them if needed. Especially also we're entering the inclement weather time of year. So there's multiple reasons why you might need to be contacting patients outside of just health reasons. So, if you're going to have any policy changes when it comes to deductible season, you want to make sure you're communicating that now so you don't try to just hit them with it after the first of the year. That doesn't usually go well. If you have any year-end newsletter, or if you've not thought about it, maybe a year-end newsletter would be good to prepare them for any changes that will be happening at the first of the year, and also just to thank them for trusting you with their healthcare. I think that goes really far with patients, that personal touch. You want to remind them of the New Year health campaigns, like maybe your flu shots, get in to get your wellness exams, whatever specialty you are. Maybe there's something specific. You could use that opportunity to do that. And then remind them how they can communicate with you other than just phone calls, maybe the portal, maybe text messages, things like that. It's always a good time to remind them of those different modalities. Okay. So just as a summary, you need to be looking at finances, operations, technology, compliance, just to name a few right now, so that your first of the year goes as smooth as possible. It is going to be here before we know it. I can't believe we're already in November of 2025. So 2026 is just around the corner, and there are very few business days if you look at it when you take out the weekends, if you don't work weekends, and you look at your holiday schedule, whatever that is for your practice, with your Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's schedule. There isn't that much time left to get all this done. So start now if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments about this, please leave that in the comments below. Smash the thumbs up button if today's video was helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and please share this with your colleagues whom you feel would benefit. I appreciate the support, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.